And I'm on air. Hello there YouTube, I'm Troy and welcome to the channel of The Lonely Wolf. Today I'm going to start a series of book reviews. So in particular I'll be looking at what I call 101 books. So these are survey courses that introduce us to particular disciplines, so especially for people who may not have been exposed to those disciplines but they want a general broad education about what those are. So as you might know, if you've followed my channel, I'm a maths major, so I teach mathematics and I have done so for many years. However, sometimes I'm one of those people who really wants a little bit more out of life, so I'm a very big advocate of self-education in reading particular books that give me a broad overview of topics that I might not have considered looking at before. Alright, so today I'm going to be talking about the field of art. So I'm going to be introducing you to a survey book on art that really helps to bring art to the masses and makes a fantastic introductory 101 type book. So the book that I've chosen to survey today is by Camille Paglia. It's called Glittering Images. So it's a journey through art from Egypt all the way up to Star Wars. So what it presents is pieces of art that come from each particular era. So it introduces us in a very user-friendly way to all the terminology. So for example, it takes us through the Impressionist paintings, the Surrealists, the Expressionists, the Cubists, etc. And so it really breaks down a lot of this terminology. Alright, so for someone like me who doesn't really have that much of a knowledge of art history, this was a fantastic introduction book. Right, so Camille Paglia, so a bit about her. So she's very well known for her first publication, which was Sexual Personae, which was released in the 90s. So this was based on her dissertation, and currently she's a professor of arts and humanities in a Philadelphia art school. Now what made her famous has also made her infamous as well. So namely, in a lot of her interviews and in some of her essays, she's introduced some very controversial ideas. That's putting it very mildly. So what I will disagree with her on is particularly her views of gender and consent. So it's a very searing type of view, almost victim blaming type thing when it comes to date rape situations. So I think what makes her outstanding as a cultural critic, kind of that really brutal, raw honesty that she has, I think that's what kind of lets her down in the other aspects when she talks about gender theory, and that's really a lot of pushback that she's gotten from that. But what I'm here today, I'm not really here to debate about her ideas on gender. I'm just talking about a particular book, and it's outside the realm of anything else. It's an art book, and it's a book about the history of art. So I'd like us to look at it just on the book itself, not really on what she has said in particular interviews, and I'll make it clear that I do disagree with some of the things that she's said. Okay, so to give you an idea of the motivation behind this book, I'd like you to read a little bit of the introduction, so I'm just going to read you a short passage. Modern life is a sea of images. Our eyes are flooded by bright pictures and clusters of text flashing at us from every direction. The brain, overstimulated, must rapidly adapt to process this swirling barrage of disconnected data. Culture in the developed world is now largely defined by all-pervasive mass media and slavishly monitored electronic personal devices. The exhilarating expansion of instant global communication has liberated a host of individual voices, but paradoxically threatened to overwhelm individuality itself. How do we survive in this age of vertigo? We must relearn how to see. Amid such jittery visual cluster, it is crucial to find focus, the basis of stability, identity, and life direction. Children above all deserve rescue from the torrential stream of flickering images, which addict them to seductive distractions and make social reality, with its duties and ethical concerns, seem dull and futile. The only way to teach focus is to present the eye with opportunities for steady perception, best supplied by the contemplation of art. Looking at art requires stillness and receptivity, which realign our senses and produce a magical tranquility. So this is a very powerful statement. I couldn't agree with Camille any more than what she said. I think she summed it up perfectly. So particularly to concern about young millennials who are surrounding themselves with video games, with social media, they've really lost that stability of their focus when it comes to contemplating still images. And even though gaming, I respect that it's an art form in itself, it's very limited in the way it's presented. So I think there's still room, and I think and I'm in agreement that we need to encourage people to take a quieter approach and just contemplate some still works of art just to steady our visual perception a little bit more. Alright, so the format of this book, so it takes us through all the different eras of art, and it presents us a particular piece that represents that era very well. Okay, so usually the format of each chapter, so what we're presented with is an image. Okay, so it's presented on a glossy paper and the presentation is absolutely beautiful. Right, so seeing it on a glossy page, it really gives us a good impression of what the art is. And it invites the reader to have a still contemplation, to look at it and to study the eye and just to have a look at it. So personally, I chose to sit for about 5 minutes in front of each piece just to contemplate and have a look at the influences and think about what I like about this and how it was different from the other pieces. Okay, so what you put into a book is what you get out of it, and that's the way I encourage people to actually approach a book like that. Now, once you've had a chance to look at the particular image, it's accompanied by a short essay, no longer than 3 pages. Now, the text itself is very accessible, it's easy to understand, and that's in opposition to Sexual Personae, which was a very academic piece. And I'm going to say it wasn't an easy book to read because it was full of, it was a very academic type piece, whereas this one presents things to the everyday audiences. Okay, so what I'll talk about now is just some of the criticisms. So I think that she's done a fantastic job in really giving me an overview. So I really enjoyed the journey that was taken through all the different eras of art. I think it was a great experience, and it was such a refreshing change to have that still, steady type of perception being presented to me, and just that quiet contemplation is something that I really enjoyed. And I think she's done a fantastic job of bringing the appreciation of art to to a lot of the masses. Alright, so I'm just going to talk about some of the disagreements I may have, or the criticisms that I have in this particular book. Okay, there's a lot of positives, and they outweigh the negatives by much. But towards the end, a lot of people have commented on this. So the very last chapter is called Red River. And so she's actually using George Lucas's Revenge of the Sith as an example of so what we consider modern art. So what she's taking is the battle scene on the planet Mustafar between Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker, and so presenting this as a modern work of art. Now, even though I might not necessarily agree with what she said, I think she's offered a lot of insight, and to some extent I think it was a great scene. So I didn't really like the Star Wars prequels, but the ending in Revenge of the Sith was probably the highlight of that particular series. Okay, so it presents us with the basic image of what it looks like. Okay, now I think including this image was a very clever move on Paglia's part, because it's obviously providing that bridge to pop culture, because when we see the word Star Wars in front of an art book, it kind of grabs attention, and it may appeal to children to think, okay, this is a starting point, so we're going from Egypt to Star Wars. So the idea of Star Wars being the ending point could grab a lot of attention for this particular book across many different age groups. Alright, now what I disagree with, so one of the weaknesses that I found in this book was the representation of modern art. I felt that there could have been a couple of more chapters that are added, because already it's quite a thin book. Okay, so you could almost read it in a whole day. That's how good it is. But I think we could have added maybe 3 more chapters at the end, just to give a better representation of modern art, because I think that she seems to have quite a cynical view of the modern art establishment. Alright, so let's think about some of the pieces that emerged in modern times. So art is really splintered off into many different directions, so we can't sort of say that we're in an age of Impressionism or Cubism or abstract art. There's a lot of combinations and a mixture of influences, but the mediums themselves have changed somewhat. So for example, I think that the craftivist, or people who do crochet and knitting type endeavours, now traditionally we've associated this with kind of the grandma and grandpa or mum sitting at home and making little socks for babies, or little beanies, etc. But now that it's become more of a youth orientated type medium or canvas, we could say, so with younger millennials taking this up, it's actually transformed itself into a very creative medium, almost a geek culture, you could say. So for example, we've seen little Star Wars figurines that can be made with a crochet hook and some wool, so amazing little projects, or Doctor Who figurines. So that's how it's become kind of a geek culture. But if we look on a much broader scale, we could look at the installation pieces that involve the yarn and crochet. So for example, you can think of the yarn bombing, or there's all sorts of other installation pieces that have been done with wool that are really fantastic. So imagine how great this book would be if there was an image of a great installation project and perhaps a little bit about the artist or craftivist as we talk about. There's also the tattooing medium as well. So this is the skin being used as a blank canvas to draw, to make some beautiful images. So perhaps maybe one of the famous people from LA Ink, so for example Kat Von D, we could have a picture of one of her best sort of tattoos and maybe a bit of an essay about tattoo as a medium. Also, there's a lot of mixed media goes on as well. So, for example, there are a lot of famous viral YouTube videos out there that are, I consider, quite artistic and very creative, in that they combine things like anime, so animations, still images, and all sorts of mixed media. And so, in further videos, I'd like to actually present some of those to you, and why I appreciate those as art pieces. Now, speaking of animation, maybe an anime, so a chapter dedicated to anime could have been included as well, because that in itself is a very thriving type of medium at the moment. And lastly, street art. Okay, so that's what my brother commented, because he was strongly in opposition to Revenge of the Sith, and he wasn't really a fan of the what do they call it? The conceptual art of those times, like what she chose as conceptual art. So he made the comment that street art is something that's very contemporary, and we're not just talking about sort of graffiti in the criminal sense. We're talking about the artists who use warehouses, and they have a very vast expanse of canvas in which they can make these amazing pictures. All right, now apart from that criticism, I think the artists have been represented very well, and more importantly, there's representation of a lot of women artists from later on. So for example, the conceptual artists, and there's even two examples where they've put women of color who are artists. So normally I wouldn't have even known who these artists were, but there's some beautiful pieces that were presented, namely installation type pieces from women of color. So that was a very good move on her part. Alright, so who would I recommend this book to? Right, so obviously to people like me who just want an overview. So we want to understand all of the terminology behind art, and we want to present it in a very easy, friendly format. So this does the job admirably to that. But it also serves the purpose for maybe parents at home who want to instill that kind of cultural and artistic appreciation amongst their children. So this is a very good guidebook for parents to share this particular understanding with their children, and to try to get our children away from that sort of mixed media and all these flickering images, and to just provide an opportunity just for stillness and contemplation of still imagery. All right, even the parents who homeschool their children, this would be a fantastic guide into history, because as I said before, and I agree with Camille Paglia on this 100%, in that I think that art education is very much lacking. So we're not really seeing art history being taught in schools, but I think it should be. Okay. Now, the next book I'd actually like to look at, so in terms of Survey 101 type books, I'd like to look at a couple of history books that I've ordered to look at. So this is the first one I've done. Okay, this is called A Little History of the World by E.H. Gombrich. So this was written a very long time ago, but it's been adapted into an illustrated version. Okay, so the images there, glossy paper, very beautiful images. So I'm going to have a read of this. Now this one supposedly is actually geared more towards children, so maybe even as young as 10, to actually introduce them to history. But the way that this is presented is as almost a narrative, so it's almost a once upon a time type format, and presents history as actually a story, which we can consider it as a very interesting story. So this is actually, I've chosen this, and this is actually a present that I've chosen for my niece who's about 10. So she's a very smart little girl. So she's very, very strong in literature. So her reading level is above almost that of a teenager. Okay, so I think this is a book I think that I really want her to carry around for the rest of her life. And there's a couple of other history books as well. So if I come across some good 101 type books, as I said, I'm a very big proponent of self-education and continued learning. Alright, so I'm going to continue to introduce you to works that will give you a very broad vision of what's going on in those fields. Well, this is The Lonely Wolf. My name is Troy, and please join me for my next video. Thank you for watching.